how did we get to having so many programs inside of companies that actually demote caring, that actually move people away from caring? And I'd like to tell you just that short story just because it's one of my favorite stories. So here's a guy named John Watson. If any of you were ever in school, I worked on a PhD in psychology, so I got to learn a lot about this guy. He's the founder of behaviorism. He is the one who had us learn that there were antecedents, behavior, and consequences, right? And if you think about just about everything you do, it's based on what this guy did. But he made some false promises for what he thought would happen. And the major flaw in what he was doing is it was based on the study of rats. So how many of you manage rats? So if you manage rats, his theory is extremely useful to you. If you don't, he gave you so many false ideas and errors, what I call class 1 errors. I call that first class, but class 1 errors in designing how it is that we work, and they are irresponsible in regard to how we develop people, how we work with customers, how it is we work with communities. In any way that we work, we got a bunch of false promises. So I'm going to give you 3 alternatives of what you can do. The first one has to do with where do people experience the locus of control. Now we know we all hate being out of control. I hate being out of control, right? Some people claim I'm a control freak, but it's more like I just believe I am responsible for however the outcomes go. If they're great, I'll stand up and say, I really contributed to that. I love being in it. Thank you for involving me. If it goes awry, I'm the first one to come to people and say, well, I screwed that up. I was asleep. I was on automatic. The real sense of what we want to do if we need to evoke caring is it has to start with people experience that they are in control. Now, what John Watson did is he only studied external control. What he had to. You can't actually ask rats what they think. I mean, you can't study their brain and see where it lights up. But it turns out one of the things that makes the difference, and in fact, when I did studies as a professor, and I was looking at first class, best place to work, top performing companies, they had such a strong preponderance of people with internal locus of control. The buck stops here. Even with a team, I still take my accountability. We found that was core. So error 2 has to do with whether or not people have a sense of personal agency. Now you just think about it. If you stand there and you say, I'm responsible, then you'll see things that need fixing and you can't not go do it. And that's the kind of people, your favorite people, the ones that you go to every time, are the ones that are out ahead of you getting things done, are the ones that have personal agency. We found that that is important to caring, because if you know you can act, if you have the internal locus of control, you take responsibility and you know you can act on it, it's funny, it wakes up caring. It sources caring. Now the challenge is that many of the things that we do diminish personal agency and internal locus of control. So every time someone assesses you, starting when you're a child, good boy, good girl, or you did that right, or you go to school and the teachers grade you, or you go into work and everything you have done is an external evaluation, these two are being diminished increasingly because people feel like they can't control things. Somebody else is making the decisions. The third error that comes from studying rats, because again, you can't actually look at how they connect to the external world, is knowing the difference between internal and external considering. It's really important, if you want to make this work, to get people directly connected to the external world. So here are the 3 that we now know from decades of experience with people, not rats, but people are what really source people caring. And they move toward caring about customers in a deep way, about the other folks they work with, about the earth that they take resources from and give a return to, about communities they live in, and about investors who need an enduring fair return. So I don't know what percentage you wrote on there that you have of people who may not care, but I want to tell you, you can have 100%. We now have MRIs. You know MRIs? Sure you do, right? You can actually see inside of the brain. You can tell when you light up all three of these processes, the external considering, not internal, the internal locus of control, not external and personal agency, we can tell that people become creative and productive. We now have dozens of research studies on bias and how bias actually makes the feedback, the performance reviews, the incentives, everything we do more harm than good. That'd be crazy, wouldn't it? Now, the reason it's important to tell you about Google is because when Google started 20 years ago, it was doing all of this stuff, and then it started growing and growing and growing. You know about that. And pretty soon, they had been creating stopgaps and creating more and more intermediaries between people and the work they wanted to do. What I'm doing there now, working with the innovation labs particularly, is creating what I call patterns of education, not training. So we have people who are meeting regularly. Everyone in the company, some of them are quarterly, some of them are monthly, so there's a range in between there, but there's a regular rhythm or pattern. We have recreated direct connections that get people directly connected to customers and stakeholders.